the issue of Meghan, for example. I think if the king just simply had the Sussexes removed from the role of the peerage, they could easily just say, screw you and carry on using those titles because they are, peerage titles are personal property. Only Parliament can strip them.
Hi, all. Kinsey Schofield here. Welcome to Royally Unfiltered, the show that takes you behind palace gates like never before. Helping me tackle the headlines this week is world-renowned royal author Hugo Vickers and royal historian Rafe Mankoo. Thank you both so much for being here. I have a power panel today, and I'm especially curious about your reaction to this piece in The Independent. The title is As Trump Turns on the UK, the King's trip to Washington in April looks more fraught than ever. And it says King Charles is heading into what could be one of the most awkward diplomatic trips of his reign. The King is expected to visit Washington this April to meet President Trump, but the timing couldn't be worse. Relations between Trump and the UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer have become increasingly tense after Trump publicly criticized Starmer for refusing to immediately allow US forces to use British bases for potential strikes on Iran. Trump even took a swipe at Starmer's leadership, suggesting he's no Winston Churchill. That's a deep cut, gentlemen. The diplomatic strain puts Charles in a tricky position because the king is often expected to help smooth over political tensions and reinforce the so-called special relationship between the US and the UK. But the trip may also be overshadowed by renewed scrutiny over the king's brother. Rafe, I think we've had this discussion about the April trip potentially being in jeopardy. Have your thoughts changed? Do you feel like April is still a-okay and a go based on recent developments?
Yes, in fact, I would say thank heavens for the monarchy because Britain needs it now more than ever, given that Keir Starmer has so ill-advisedly created stormy waters between us and America. Starmer had invested so much energy, so much time in trying to shore up the special relationship that it's remarkable that he was so willing to jettison it so easily over such a stupid decision as to not allow American planes to use RAF bases. Trump wasn't even asking the RAF to take part. He just wanted to use the actual physical landing strips to take off. And why Starmer made that decision, part of which he had to almost immediately U-turn on later on, is completely beyond comprehension. And you have to feel sorry for His Majesty, I mean, what a reign he's had. First his wayward son, and then his brother, and here a state visit, well, an official visit to America, much like his late mother did in 1976 for the bicentennial, should have been a great opportunity for friendship and cordiality, and instead, again, overshadowed over this. There had been prior to this great worries about the issue of Greenland and whether Trump wanting to annex Greenland and his continuing hostility with Canada would cause an issue. All of that's been forgotten about because this story is actually so much better. The King, of course, welcomed Trump warmly to Britain. We know that Trump has warm affection for the monarchy, so it may be. We often talk about Britain being the world's number 2 soft power nation, and the monarchy is the strongest weapon in our arsenal, and we need to wield it now more than ever. If anything is going to calm ruffled feathers in the White House, it would be by a visit by His Majesty.
Hugo?
Well, that is very interesting. Can I just ask you, are we absolutely certain that the king is going on a state visit? Have we got a date?
I heard I've been briefed that it's towards the end of April. So I am hearing to prepare to book my flight to be there from a media standpoint.
But not actually a date actually given.
I
No.
don't think I have that, no.
That's quite significant, I feel, because I think that means that it's all slightly up in the air. But I couldn't agree more with Rafe. I mean, first of all, the king will he will do what he's told by his prime minister. If he's told to go on a state visit or official visit or whatever you like to call it, he will go. And yes, he will do his best, and I think he probably do a very good job. I'm not as worried about this as everybody else because I think when you get a visit of this kind, people get excited to see the king. They perhaps will be interested to see how President Trump responds to tries to match what he was given at Windsor not so long ago, where all the stops were pulled out and how. And I'm sure he'll be thinking up all sorts of ideas. And I think the fun of the visit will probably smooth over those ruffled feathers, and at the end of it, we'll all feel much better.
And I should
Agreed.
say also that there hasn't really been a big backlash against Britain from the American public. And they certainly don't. I mean, most of them have never even heard of Keir Starmer. So that's a good thing for Britain at the end of the day. And so there's no suggestion, of course, that you're going to have any sort of public protest. This is very much something to deal with the diplomatic relationship.
I don't
Hugo,
think
I
there'll
will.
be
Go,
sorry,
go
I don't
ahead.
think there'll be any demonstrations against the king. Do you? I don't think there's any
No,
wish.
that's what I'm saying. There's
No,
no evidence that there's any of that going to happen. So this is
no.
just a diplomatic spat. There's no wider problem with the visit.
I think that there will be some obnoxious people, but there are obnoxious unemployed people everywhere that we have to see on TV all the time. I did want to ask you, Hugo, because I thought it was interesting. The Independent, the takeaway from that piece was that the king would be walking into a geopolitical and a PR minefield. But it doesn't sound like, Hugo, you think that that's true. You think that this could be just a classic state visit. This could just be smiling, shaking hands, looking sharp, engaging with important people and schmoozing.
Well, I think that state visits, they are not really meant to have an overtly political agenda. Of course, they do, but they are diplomatic. They're sort of gateways. They're sort of opening a path. They're opening discussions, and then others follow and do the actual work. Sort of when the Queen, for example, went to Russia, that was all very formal and all very exciting. And then after that, the politicians could get together, the businessmen could come in and try and do deals, and all that sort of thing follows. And I think the king will be above the fray of all this. That's what I think. And I think that, as I say, the fun of the visit and the optics, if you like, the whatever the displays that are put on, how he tries to match. Good luck to him, the Waterloo Chamber and St George's Hall and things like that. That will be interesting to see what he comes up with, and I think people will have fun with that. And as you rightly say, Rafe, I mean, no one's particularly interested in Keir Starmer. I mean, he's not terribly popular over here, and therefore I think he'll be rather sidelined in all this. Let's wait and see. But I wonder whether the visit will definitely take place.
And like Rafe, Trump loves to sideline Starmer. I remember that. I can't remember what the exact moment was, but they were on a stage and we felt like Starmer was coming up to speak. Do you remember when Trump cuts him off and like shoves him in the back? That was so humbling. It was so awkward to watch. I wish I could remember the circumstances of that, but Trump is almost not shy about his lack of respect for Starmer. So you guys aren't kidding. I really do think he's going to play such a background minimal role, if any role whatsoever here.
Well,
Yes, that was an international meeting of the heads of government, and he did rather look like a sixth form prefect asking for permission to go to the lavatory in front of Donald Trump, who dismissed him arbitrarily. But yes, I mean. The only problem here is really the context. We've never had an official visit to America by a reigning monarch when relations have been so bad. I mean, I can't think of a time when they were so bad, even when President Reagan attacked Grenada, of course, without advising Margaret Thatcher or Her Majesty. There was no sort of rupture as we have now because President Reagan and President Trump, two very different types of people. But of course, monarchy is the great healer. People do tend to forget about other things when you deal with the members of the royal family and the monarchy. So it will be a feel-good moment. The media class, some people in the MAGA movement will try to make some issue out of it, but that's all going to be very, very minimalist and off to the sides. I think this is just a great opportunity actually to demonstrate why the monarchy is so important to Britain because it does rise above politics and it's able to pour oil on stormy waters better than anything else that we have in this country. So it's just another testament to what a great asset it is.
I was talking to somebody yesterday who'd been present at President Trump's state banquet when the Queen was the hostess. And he said, first of all, as you remember, President Trump wasn't terribly well dressed, his sort of expansive white waistcoat and things. But this friend of mine said that the Queen set off at her speech and began to refer to having met Truman and knowing Eisenhower and all these things. And following on exactly what you said, Rafe, he was like the errant schoolboy, and she was like the schoolmistress, and you know she was able just to very gently throw out all these connections that she had, and he sat there meekly taking it all. So I think he's also going to be quite in awe of the king. I mean, I know he respects the king and he supports him in every possible way. So he will also be very keen to make sure that this visit works well. It's very much in his interests that it should do so.
That's
Indeed.
right. And
Yeah.
of course, the Queen did go in the bicentennial year. There's every expectation, just to give my own two pence worth on whether His Majesty will go. My understanding, it's the issue of his health, which is the key factor as to why we haven't had a definitive date. But we are looking at late April. If His Majesty doesn't go, then it may be that the Prince of Wales will have to have a bigger role there rather than just visiting around, say, the World Cup, as was the original intention. But the hope is going, and I would expect, given the current diplomatic difficulties, there'll be even more pressure on the king to, in fact, make that trip.
Very good point. All right, let's pivot to Prince William. An interesting new book, Russell Myers, author of William and Catherine, The Monarchy's New Era. In this book, he claims the rift between Prince William and Prince Harry wasn't just about Meghan or Megxit, that it started brewing years earlier over something surprisingly personal, the military. According to his book, both brothers wanted to champion the armed forces, but Prince William felt he had first claim because as the future king, he would eventually become commander in chief of the British military. Harry, who we should point out did serve 2 tours in Afghanistan, although the audience loves to call him Bunker Harry, so I will acknowledge them as well. It says that Harry had an issue with that because he didn't like being pushed back into the little brother role and resented being told not to step on William's territory. We've also read for over the years that there was some friction regarding Africa, how they both loved Africa and they wanted to champion those. Even Harry writes about that in Spare. Um, Rafe, what's your opinion on this? Do you think? I mean, I look at this and I go, well, I'm sure that they butted heads over it, but at the end of the day, it was a terrible American that came in and wreaked absolute havoc on this family. I'll say it. I'm an American, and I know that this is a woman that did this.
Yeah, look, I mean, none of us were privy to these conversations. We weren't flies on the wall. This is a lot of hearsay. Look, let's just say, just for the sake of it, that there's some substance to these arguments. Brothers are brothers. They may have rivalry, maybe more friendly, maybe less friendly. But yes, it was indeed the arrival of Meghan that really has led to that great fracture, that great fissure. I mean, for heaven's sake, I don't see why you couldn't have two members of the royal family, two brothers, both being engaged in military causes. For heaven's sake, we've had King Charles and Andrew and the Princess Royal all have had lifelong roles in relation to the military. Andrew, of course, having seen frontline action much as Harry did, but in both cases, Charles and William, of course, being the heirs to the throne at one point. So I don't see why there needs to be a conflict as to why two siblings can't both be engaged in some capacity in such a broad field as the military, where there are so many different areas to the military. Likewise with Africa. I mean, the late Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, pioneering conservationist, hugely involved in African wildlife through his work for the World Wildlife Fund, and his daughter, the Princess Royal, through things like Save the Children and other things, also equally active in Africa too. There again, she's focused on human plight. He was focused on conservation. There's no reason you wouldn't get a similar accommodation between the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Sussex as well. So yes, I'm sure there was some sort of rivalry, perhaps, but I think that's probably being blown out of proportion. We know upon whose shoulders the blame really lies for that fracture.
Yeah, both worthy causes, Hugo. So why not double up? It's okay to double up on worthy causes, but this is not the first time the British royal family has been disrupted by a divorced American woman, is it, Hugo?
Ah, No, it isn't. That's perfectly true. But you're obviously referring to the Duchess of Windsor, although the situation's rather different because my theory about the Duchess of Windsor is that she got way out of her depth and that he wanted to go and he must have known they wouldn't accept her. And I don't think she wanted him to go. I think she was very keen to be the friend of the king, much more so than being the wife of the exiled Duke of Windsor and the most hated woman in the world for a time. That was all grossly unfair.
Wow, Hugo, that was amazing. That was a nice little soundbite right there. Did you not want to plug your book?
Oh, well, I have a book coming out. Yes, it's that's rather more about later on in the Duchess's life because there's a film coming out in sometime this year with Joan Collins as the Duchess of Windsor and Isabella Rossellini as Maitre Suzanne Bloom. And the so my book Behind Closed Doors is coming out in America and being reissued over here in Britain. But that tells the story of what happened, her awful fate after the Duke died. And there's this poignant photograph of the Duchess um, mounting the steps to the aeroplane and going back to France. And when you look at that picture, with hindsight, you realize that she's stepping into a very dangerous situation because if you have a sly doctor, a sly butler, a dodgy doctor, an avaricious Swiss banker, and a dishonest lawyer, if you're very rich and you're in poor health and you don't get on terribly well with your husband's relations and you have no relations of your own, you are in serious trouble. And all that happened to her. And it's
Mm,
absolutely disgraceful. And the Duke, yeah, I think if he'd known that that would be her fate to lie on a bed on a life support machine for 10 years while they creamed off the estate, I wonder whether he might not have thought twice.
right. And that Joan Collins movie is based on your book. So that's something that we get to look forward to this year, right?
I think it's going to be very exciting. I'm contractually not allowed to talk about the film, but
Oh, okay. All right. We'll move on.
all right, I can tell you it's going to be very good. I think it'll be Oscars all round, frankly. I think it'll be very powerful, and I'm absolutely delighted. I want this story to be told more widely. Obviously films are different from books. They're different also slightly from, they have to knock the nail firmly on the head in a filmic way. They will do that, I'm sure, and I can't wait to see it. I saw a day of filming, but I haven't seen the actual film yet.
Love it. Rafe and I will give you our reviews as soon as it comes out. We will we will give you our critiques, although I'm sure we're going to love it all around. Hi guys, I have to tell you about a total game changer, Peak's Liver Detox Protocol. You may not know it, but your liver handles a lot. Energy, hormones, digestion, and even your mood. But with all the stress and toxins from everyday life, it needs some love. Forget harsh cleanses, Peak delivers gentle, daily support inspired by traditional Chinese medicine. Their routine uses two simple blends. The first is a warming turmeric mix with cinnamon and black pepper, designed to help the body absorb it better and support the liver while calming inflammation. The second is a ginger and cinnamon blend that helps with blood flow, digestion, bloating, and immune support. The magic is how they work together to activate and flush for better digestion, stable energy, less brain fog, and that light, clear feeling. My energy is consistent now, skin is clearer, and less bloating. Redefine your standard of health, secure 20% off your order, and begin your intentional wellness journey today at peaklife.com/Kinsey. That's PIQUE life.com/Kinsey. This was an interesting moment, and I apologize if you didn't see the actual interview. I should have sent you a link. But Prince Harry being criticized over sidestepping questions about his uncle during a TV interview while visiting Jordan. The journalist was very clever in the way he kept mentioning Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But Harry wanted to focus on humanitarian work. And when the interviewer referenced the growing scandal back in London, Harry tried to sidestep. Well, actually, Harry to me looks visibly uncomfortable, almost like he's looking for help from the World Health Organization representative that's standing next to him, like, help me, help me. What makes the headlines is Harry's, refusal to acknowledge it. And then his awkward joke about how there's a lot of news develops quickly, and it's clearly a reference to his uncle. Rafe, I think let's just talk about this in general. What the hell was he doing in Jordan? Is he a liability to the British royal family? We've seen Israel come out and counter some of the information he said, accusing him of repeating false information. Is this guy without the support of the palace, does he have the right to be there? Does he know what he's doing? I mean, I just don't think the palace would have ever put him in a situation like this if he was still representing them.
No, but he's essentially trying to exist within a new sort of semi-royal world. The only things that the Duke of Sussex knows how to be is a soldier, a polo player, and a prince. He doesn't really have any other skill
And a
set.
fox,
And
Rafe, and a
and so
fox.
his the whole world, he's been, Meghan was able to wrap herself around him, take him over to America solely to advance her own career. It was all about Project Meghan, and he's been sitting there in California with her friends as his friends. And so I think this was very much an effort by him to get back to doing what he loves best. And Hugo also, I think, remember the story of the Duchess of Windsor's hairdresser when they were in France. He was doing her hair one day, and he saw the Duke of Windsor in the garden with the little pug dogs trying to order them around, and they wouldn't listen to him. And the hairdresser thought, "My gosh, how pathetic! This man was once King Emperor. Now he can't even get the dogs to obey him." And I think rather Harry's sort of feeling that there's no role for him, there's nothing for him to actually find fulfillment in his life. So he's trying to go back to what he knows best. At least he takes to the role naturally, unlike Meghan, who seems quite out of place, and everything seems to be a PR move and an opportunity there, as opposed to having some sort of genuine interest, which at least Harry appears to be or feigns to be doing. But it does call into question his judgment going into an area like this, of course, which is so politically sensitive at this time. Although I have to say, on this issue, I actually side with the Duke of Sussex for once because. He does want to bring attention to a perfectly valid issue about Gaza and the suffering, the bloodshed, and the whatever's been happening there. And had he spoken about his uncle, that would have grabbed the headlines, that would have grabbed the front pages, rather than the real purpose of him being there. And he also wants to try to mend bridges with his father and with the royal family, again, because of course they realize their value is only in relation to their proximity to the monarchy. And so I suppose he felt that if he commented on Andrew, he might risk damaging those relations that he's trying to heal.
Hugo, let me ask you about the security element of this because Harry tells the BBC that the UK is not safe enough for him and his family, and then he is over in Jordan like days before war breaks out. Are you at all like Harry? Maybe the UK is a safer space for you.
Well, and do you remember he went to Colombia, which again, and the Foreign Office advises British subjects on the whole not to go to because it's a difficult area. So all that is sort of hypocrisy, and it's he's probably been misled by his lawyers as well on the issue. And they say go for it, you might win in the British courts and all that sort of stuff. I can imagine. I mean, again, I quite agree with him. He should not have been asked to talk about Andrew. Why should he? And he was right to sidestep it. You're absolutely right. He looked extremely uncomfortable when the question came up. Um, but what's he doing there? Why is he there? He's not doing it for the benefit of the United Kingdom. He's doing it for the benefit of himself and his wife. I mean, that's what they do these days. They are loners making their way in the world. And so they're always reinventing themselves and doing these things and grabbing whatever headlines they can get for themselves. I'm sure that, he sincerely believes in the suffering of we saw some terrible sights in that particular interview and program. I mean, it's awful. So, good for him to highlight it. That I don't blame him for that at all. And possibly he should do more things like that. But you can't. He's been told you can't be half in, half out. You can't do things which are contrary to what the Foreign Office might want you to do, and you just go blundering in, and then all sorts of trouble follows.
Rafe, you are right when it comes to this particular visit because we actually saw the need for it. We saw what the ultimate objective was. When Colombia and Nigeria was a little like, why are they there? Well, no, seriously, why are you in Nigeria right now? Um, I have been told that we should expect more trips like this from them this year. Where do you it's a silly question, but because I think that these two are so unpredictable. But maybe instead of asking where you think they'll go, I should ask you where you think their efforts would be best placed if they do try to do more visits like this in 2026.
Oh, I don't know. Their efforts will be best to go into a silent monastery for a while and take a vow of silence. I think much better for everybody involved. I just question the motivation here. I think it's quite clear that when you have someone like Meghan who is so desperate to be an A-list celebrity and rub shoulders with the great and good in America, that one just has to wonder how much of this is genuine and how much of this is done to essentially get a halo and wings from her fellow Hollywood lovies. And it's just essentially a clear case of setting up a rival court in America. You can see that from their branding, you can see that from their website, from the font they use, the continued use of Duke and Duchess, giving their children their titles of prince and so forth. Everything is basically done to replicate in America what they could have had they actually continued to do it. They could have had all of this had they remained parts of the royal family.
Agree with you, Rafe. Hugo, there is a sense that like Harry's forcing the half in, half out. Some people have tried to correct me on that and say he can't force it. But from a public perception perspective, like Vanity Fair used the headline semi-official tour. I mean, Vanity Fair, I feel like that's a very respected publication. So if I am not a royal watcher and I see that headline, I might assume that this was something that was endorsed by the royal family, or that Harry and Meghan still have some royal magic and that's why they're there. You've got a book about Queen Elizabeth coming out. Can you talk to me about her very clear instructions about no half in, half out? If you do not want to be or represent the British royal family anymore, you simply can't. You can become a Zara, you can become a Peter, but you can't do the half in, half out world.
No, I mean that obviously doesn't work. I mean, it wasn't going to work. Very sensibly, they were offered the option of having a bit of time. I think it was a year or so to see how it worked out, and then they opted out, as it were, completely. So she was as generous as she could possibly have been. But I wonder whether they aren't a little bit nervous at the moment, because there was an awful lot of talk about how difficult it would be to take away Prince Andrew's titles and things like that. And with a stroke of the pen, the whole lot went. So I reckon that, if the Sussexes misbehave, it wouldn't take long for the king, or indeed his successor, to do something similar to them. And that would, of course, completely, on Rafe's point, using the titles, that would completely ditch them.
Well, unfortunately, of course, the fact is the Duke of York still remains legally the Duke of York.
Ah,
He
yes.
hasn't had his peerage title. He's His Grace the Duke of York rather than His Royal Highness the Duke of York.
Well,
Um,
it's a moot point, though, isn't it? I mean, he's not allowed to use it, so it's not no use to him. There's lots of sort of discussions, if you can, the fine points of peerage law, and is he in fact, because he's the son of the Duke of Edinburgh, should he not be Lord Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, or
exactly.
Andrew Mountbatten Windsor because he served in the Navy? All that, but basically, perfectly well that's all rubbish. I mean, he can't use any of it. They just tell him what he is, and that's what he is.
Oh no, well that's where I disagree. I think he could. I think he, out of respect for the monarchy, he is using it, and that's my problem with the issue of Meghan, for example. I think if the king just simply had the Sussexes removed from the role of the peerage, they could easily just say, screw you and carry on using those titles because they are, peerage titles are personal property. Only Parliament can strip them. You can essentially, as we did with the Duchess of Cornwall, we referred to her as Duchess of Cornwall by convention, even though she was Princess of Wales. There was nothing forcing us to refer to her as Duchess of Cornwall. Andrew could very well carry on insisting on being called Duke of York. We wouldn't necessarily need to respect that, but I could easily see Meghan rebelling if she was ever stripped of the title by the king in that way to carry on using it unless Parliament intervened to formally take it away from her. But as you
But
say,
Rafe,
it's a moot
Rafe,
point, and I don't think it's ever going to come to that.
Rafe, she
No.
does. She does. She's not supposed to use the HRH title, but we see when she sends gift baskets of jam and whatever to her girlfriends around Montecito, she's using her HRH title. And we know ultimately why she's doing that, because that girlfriend, that high profile celebrity friend, snaps a picture and she sends it to her other high profile celebrity friends. And it's word of mouth. It's Meghan, reassuring these women that she still has this clout, basically, through subtleties. I mean, I feel like it's a total manipulative move for her to refer to herself as HRH on gift baskets to girlfriends all over Montecito, because she just wants the other moms on the soccer team to see this little title of hers.
And that's why she annoys so many people, because it's the sheer hypocrisy. She mocks the rituals of the court. She mocks the protocol of the royal family. She mocks Her late Majesty and curtsying and so forth, and says that she's an egalitarian, and yet, of course, she wraps herself in ermine at every opportunity.
Hugo, there is discussion about removing Andrew from the line of succession, which could take years. Could Parliament slide in Harry and Meghan, well, Harry, I should say, just to kill two birds with one stone? Or is the disdain for them not that bad over there yet?
Well, my feeling is, with great respect to what Rafe says, that they can basically do whatever they want and the establishment will find a way. And, there are all sorts of funny things like sort of orders in council and letters patent and all sorts of funny things. And I'm sure that some constitutional lawyer could dig something up which could deal with it quite effectively. You've already had, as far as Andrew's concerned, you've had the Prime Minister of Australia weighing in and saying he would, he would do that. He would support it. And so once you've got all of them supporting it, and I mean, it'll just happen, I think. I mean, to be honest, I didn't think they could do what they've done so easily, but they did it.
Do you have a
I mean, you go
reaction,
back.
Ray?
I mean, the Duchess of Windsor, theoretically, a lot of people who've all can say, look, she was the wife of HRH, the Duke of Windsor, and therefore, in France, for example, the husband's title is always bestowed equally on the wife, and she was always referred to as HRH in the house in Paris, and which pleased the Duke particularly. And but they can do whatever they like, so I think they should all watch out, frankly.
Rafe, did you have a response to that?
In terms of losing titles.
Yeah, and that they are basically just firecrackers that are unpredictable and will do whatever they want.
Yes, no, but as I say, we have a long-standing principle that the crown cannot take away your personal property, and peerage titles are a form of intangible property, incorporeal hereditament. So there's nothing, orders in council, legislation, nothing can be done. Only Parliament, your elected representatives have the power to dispossess you of your property. Very different to styles. So you can remove somebody from the HRH. You can do that with letters patent. You can, well, there's an argument as to whether you can take someone's princely title away from them, because yes, by letters patent you can strip them of a princely status, but as the son of a king or a queen under the common law, you are also a prince as well. So that's a bit more technical. But anyway, that's something for a constitutional YouTube channel discussion, I think.
I think we would need to be caffeinated quite a bit more for that pursuit. Well, what do you think? Do you think that Harry and Meghan should be stripped of their titles, or that they remain a liability to the future of the British royal family? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. Hugo Vickers, Rafe, Heydel, Mankoo, I adore you and your brilliant brains. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I hope I get to see you again very soon.